They used to call David Benefield Raptor, which is an apt name when you consider the mess he used to make of his opponents during the golden era of online poker. Today, there is no snarl, there's no blood. All we get is a very open young man talking about his route to the top of high-stakes poker. David, how's life?
Pretty good.
No pressure on us. Jason Kuhn said that he's really looking forward to this one.
Okay.
He told me that the first time he ever met you, he was shaking.
Shaking?
Yeah.
Did he say anything else?
No, that's what he said. He said he was such a fanboy of yours back in the day that he was shaking. So what do you think about that?
I think it's kind of interesting. I mean, he's a pretty intimidating guy. So I think the first time we met was actually in a poker tournament in Vegas, like 10K 6 max or something, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And he was on my right, and he was just playing like an absolute savage, 3-betting a ton, being hyper aggressive. I was like, who the hell is this guy? Like, he seems pretty tough. And we just sort of struck up conversation. He's just like a super genuine, really nice guy. We kind of instantly became friends.
So him telling me that he was shaking when he met you, obviously he looked at you as some kind of superstar back then. Do you ever remember being a poker superstar? I mean, just to narrow the niche down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think poker superstar is a pretty big stretch. But like, I had a blog that a lot of people read, and I played reasonably high stakes for the time, and I made some training videos and stuff like that, and was very active in the community. But yeah, I mean, it's nice that he thinks I'm a superstar, but I don't think that's necessarily true.
When I was interviewing Tom Dwan the other day, I asked him this question that I'll ask you. But back in that time, was there moments where you was ever chasing the fame or thinking about fame, or did that just happen as a consequence of your love of the game?
I think when I was young, I liked the idea of being famous. It just seemed really cool. It's like, oh yeah, I'll be on TV and people knew who I am. But like when people started to recognize me and like talk to me a lot, I was like, huh, it's kind of nice to just like be behind the scenes too. Like you have a little bit more time to yourself and you can kind of do your own thing. But it was a really cool process. Just like, it sort of happened out of nowhere, right? Like we're all just kids playing poker on the internet or with our friends or just kind of going to the casino. And then like all of a sudden we're playing really big stakes for a whole lot of money. And then there's cameras around and then it's like, okay, this is a thing, we're doing it. And so it all just happens very quickly, and you don't really know or have a plan along the way. At least I didn't.
Well, I've got a nasty habit of thinking in kind of like polarized terms, and I know the world's grey, but I was similar. So when I was younger, we all wanted to be millionaire. That's what we wanted to be. We wanted to be millionaire and be famous. Mm-hmm. At what point, can you remember a time in your life where there was a convergence, where all of a sudden you were living the life that you thought you were, and how did that differ to quote-unquote ordinary life? So
probably, I think since I was 18, I mean, my life was not ordinary. I dropped out of school, started playing poker. But like when I started making a ton of money, my life didn't really change at all. I was still just staying at home, sitting in front of my computer and playing a lot of poker or traveling to these tournaments. Like I had a little bit more money, so I lived in a nicer house, I sat in a nicer chair, I drove a nicer car, but on a day-to-day, my life was pretty much the same, I think. I didn't really make any crazy outlandish purchases. I wasn't like flying private everywhere. I wasn't just like balling out in Ibiza or anything. Like I was just kind of living, trying to play poker and get better, and yeah.
Was there a disappointment there? Was it like, oh, this isn't what it's supposed to be like? or was it just a smooth ride, the money came in and just nothing changed?
Things change, right? Like when you don't have money, you kind of stress about not having money, and you're like, shit, okay, like I gotta grind hard. I want to like make sure I can set myself up. I don't have to like worry about it. And then the stresses kind of start to go away. And I think the biggest change is probably like, I wasn't worried as much about like what I'm gonna have to do to secure my future. And you have a lot of freedom in that. Like I didn't have to think about, well, one day I'm gonna have to work for somebody, or I'm gonna have to get a job, and I'm gonna have to live someone else's vision for 40 hours a week. I got to take a lot of control over my life, and that was very freeing.
In my late 30s, I joined the Landmark Forum. I don't know if you have the Landmark Forum in the US.
Tell me about it.
So it's like a life coaching kind of seminar for a couple of days, and there's different levels of it. So I went along to London and I did this thing, and they were saying that every human being has 3 defining moments in their life that creates the personality that you ultimately become. So for me now, I'm in my 40s, and you have to think about those 3 moments, and mine were 1, age 7, realizing my dad's not my dad and that I'm half Chinese. 10, moving countries from England to Wales and losing all my friends, and then 3 at 35, stopping drinking alcohol. Do you have any, what were you, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but what would your 3 defining moments of your life be, do you think?
So kind of similar to you, I'm adopted. I don't know my birth parents, and so I never really had a, I guess I didn't have like the blood bond or the same type of family that I guess other people have or that they're used to. And so a large part of my identity I felt like was on me to kind of define. And like I had a very loving family. I had a really great childhood, and I like couldn't be happier with how all that turned out. But I still kind of always felt like I was a little bit on my own to find my own path. And so I think that it wasn't an extra pressure, but it was a pressure I guess I put on myself to just define success on my own terms and kind of figure out who I was. The other thing is probably just, I mean, where we are right now, playing poker for the first time.
Yeah.
I was 16, just hanging out with friends, and we just watched Rounders. I was like, oh, this game looks pretty cool. So we're kind of sitting down playing, we're giving it a try. I noticed like one of my friends seems to be doing things a little bit better. He's kind of winning more consistently. He's folding a little bit more, he's betting more aggressively, and I'm like, oh, maybe there's something to this. And so I ordered a bunch of books and started trying to figure it out, and then started getting better very quickly, really fell in love with the game, tried to find all the little card rooms around town to play in, and then when I was 18, started playing online, and just was really, really lucky to be in a situation where I didn't have a job, I wasn't too concerned about going to school, and so I could just spend a lot of time learning this game that I was really enjoying without any pressure to earn an income for a family or anything like that. So I think there's kind of like, I was in a sweet spot in time, like around 2003, 2004, where I was able to devote the time and energy to poker, where I was able to get quite good at it, I think. A third thing, I'm not really sure.
It's not come yet.
Yeah,
maybe it's not arrived yet.
TBD,
How
it's
old
on
are you
its
now?
way. I'm 32.
Yeah, you got plenty of time.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I was a right snoop. I was the kid who would go looking for my Christmas presents before Christmas, that type of kid. Mm-hmm. And once I found a box with papers in and birth certificates, and I found adoption papers. And I remember just crying my eyes out because I thought my family had lied to me, and that I was adopted. And I later found out that it was my dad had adopted me to be and my mum was always my mum, Mm-hmm. But I remember that moment. I mean, how old was you when you found out that you was adopted, and how did that feel?
Yeah, so my parents told me from as long as I can remember. I mean, I'm sure I was like 2 or 3 years old, and they were just like, hey, this is kind of how it works. And I probably didn't really understand it. And I think for a long time, adolescence, I was confused by it, and I didn't really have any friends that were adopted, so I didn't really, I felt like I was a little bit alone, and I think I was angry about it. Yeah, it's just something that's always been with me, something I've always known about, and as I got older and started to understand it, I'm really grateful. I could have easily had a terrible childhood. I could have easily just not been born, and there are a lot of branches of that tree that aren't nearly as positive as the one that I happened to end up on. So it's been a really my perspective has shifted greatly over time, and now it's just something that I'm really grateful for.
Whenever I tell people that part of my story, the 2 questions is, one is, do you speak Chinese? That's the first thing they say. I'm like, no. And then the second thing they always ask is, have you ever tried to find your father? And for me personally, the thought of that just seems absurd, because I don't define it as my father. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had any consideration of finding your real birth parents?
Yeah, so I think it's something that's always at the back of my mind. I'm always curious about where I come from and who these people are, and did they look like me? Are their interests aligned? But it's also not, at this point in my life, I don't really identify with that. Mm-hmm. That's not who I am. That's not and it's something that if I'm also self-conscious about it, right? Because I don't want to interfere in someone else's life. I'm sure like they probably have different families, they're with different people, like there's any number of things could be going on, and I don't want to impose myself into that life. It was a closed adoption, so I didn't. It was meant to be such that I don't know who they are, and it's really difficult to track them down.
Yeah.
And I want to be respectful of that.
Yeah, I didn't want to hurt my dad's feelings as well. I kept thinking if I do this, my dad's going to think that I don't accept him or something. So I just left it in the end, you know. But it's interesting. It's interesting to talk about this because with somebody who reaches success at the age of 18. I'm not saying you had all the life figured out at 18, but you reach success. There's a danger there that you don't hit the hardships and the troubles and stuff that we need in order for us to grow into something much better. It's unusual to see somebody sailing through life and everything was so great and reach the pinnacle of success. Eric Seidel was talking about his dyslexia the other day. Jason was talking about his father. I think so far only the Greenwoods have been like, yeah, life was fucking awesome, everything was great, and I just got where I was. So it's interesting that you share that part of your story because I'm sure it has shaped you a lot, you know. I'm going to pick up a piece of paper now because I'm not very good at keeping quotes here, but I noticed you're into Stoic philosophy. So you had this Epictetus quote, "Show me someone for whom success is less important than the manner in which it's achieved." And you retweeted it, and I was just curious as to why that particular one spoke to you.
Yeah, I think I really liked the general message of that the result is less important than the process. A lot of poker is you make your decisions, you play your hand, and then all the money goes in, and all right, now it's up to randomness, and you can't control the result. In tournaments, you cash 15% of the time. If you're really, really good, maybe you cash 20% of the time, right? And so you're failing a lot. And there's only so much you can do about that. And so it's really important to kind of separate yourself from the end result and really focus on your processes. So it's like, did I make the right decision in this hand? How can I get better? And it's just as a general philosophy, as a general practice, it's been really helpful for me to try to think about things in terms of, how can I get better? How can I make these incremental improvements over time? How can I keep improving every single day instead of just like, did I make money today or did I win this tournament?
Yeah, I think it's super important. I help people with addiction to alcohol, and very often they're so desperate to get to the top of the mountain and to be sober. And it's like, oh, hang on a minute, it's actually what we're doing today and what we're going to do tomorrow and the next day. That is where we get our fulfillment. That is what it's all about. Mm-hmm. That is where you'll see, you'll feel these incremental changes.
Sure.
What is it about Stoic philosophy that really speaks to you? Because I saw quite a number of Ryan Holiday's retweets from the Daily Stoic. So what is it that speaks to you?
I think the general philosophies of Stoicism kind of speak to me. Like Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations talks about like 3 pillars of Stoicism: objective judgment, unselfish action, and willing acceptance of external events. And the general mindset that like, hey, we can't control what's outside of us. All we control is what we do, how we think about things, how we approach life, and then the rest kind of just comes as it is. It just makes sense to me. And I think in a poker context, it really makes sense as well.
That very often we think that life is full of suffering and pain and unbearable moments, but when we look back at them with the benefit of hindsight, we're like, what was I worrying about?
When things aren't going well, like you're playing poker, you're losing, you're taking it bad, you're suffering, you're like, this is miserable, I'm never gonna get through it, I'm never gonna get out of this downswing. But then you keep playing, you get better, you keep working on your game, you're picking your spots, and you do get out of it. Things do get better. You do continue to live. It's not the end of the world. Then you look back on it a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, and you don't even remember it. You don't remember that downswing that during, when you were going through it, you were feeling so much pain, so much suffering. And so I think like being able to zoom out and put a little bit of perspective around those events helps you realize that, hey, when you're suffering the next time, it's like, okay, you're gonna get through it. It's not the end of the world. Like you're still living, you're still breathing, you're still healthy, you have friends around you have loved ones close. Like zooming out and just kind of recognizing that like, hey, what you're going through, there's bigger problems in the world. Your suffering isn't like that big of a deal. Just like get through it, live, get better.
I mean, it's one thing to know and understand that on an intellectual basis, but it's completely a different subject when you're in the heat of the moment. That part of you, that real competitive streak where like, you know, you feel like bursting into tears or whatever when you've lost. How do you...
I wouldn't go that far.
That's me. I just shared a bit of myself there. But you say like it's a physical pain. I mean, how do you view that? Do you view that as an impediment? Do you view that as a strength, weakness? Is it a bit of both? I mean,
yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, right? So it's an impediment, I think, to feel that suffering and to let it hurt so bad, because it's just like it doesn't seem good to me. But like it's also a driving force, right? Like I don't want to feel that pain ever again. And so maybe like people that don't feel that pain don't have such a desire to not feel it again in the future, and so they have less incentive to work hard to improve. But like that. I think a lot of people that just really, really hate to lose tend to get quite good at things because they just never want to feel that way. And so they constantly get better, they constantly work. And I think Jason's kind of similar. Like he really hates to lose, super competitive guy. And like I think that's really important for success in something like poker as well. Just like the constant desire to get better. And for me, a lot of it is just pain avoidance. Like I don't want to suffer and loss, and so I'm going to work really hard to win.
I like that. And sticking with Stoic philosophy, you know, it's very much about focusing on things in the moment and kind of like not drifting away into the future and drifting away into the back. When it comes to purpose and the question of, you know, what we're doing with our life, I know that's very fluid, but what are you focusing on right now in your life?
Well, for the last few months, I've been focusing a lot on poker. I found short deck and sort of became fascinated with the game. I haven't learned a new poker game in years, and so it's been really fun just kind of like learning how this new game works and playing a lot, and then just trying to understand it and get better at it. So I'm traveling a little bit to play some of these poker tournaments, the Triton events, playing a little bit online, and just trying to be around people in the poker world once again. And it's been just like a really, really fun process, kind of getting back into it and like coming out and seeing all the old faces and just getting back in the mix.
Because I read that your appearance at the PSPC in January was like your first tournament in a year and a half, right?
I wasn't even really planning on going to the PSPC. Jason actually talked me into it. He's like, hey, they're adding a bunch of money to the prize pool. Like, it's easy flight from 10. I was like, all right, I'll go down there and I'll play it. Like, I hadn't played a no-limit tournament in a long time. I hadn't spent that much time working on my game. But I was like, go to the Bahamas, be fun, play this tournament. And it kind of like reignited me a little bit. Like, it was quite fun. Like, I got a min cash, so I didn't really make that much money. But it was fun sitting at the table and just kind of like bantering with the guys again and just getting back in there. Yeah.
So when I read that and I seen that you hadn't played a tournament for a year and a half, obviously it doesn't mention if you were playing cash games or not, but the first thing that come up to me is, well, what's he been doing then? You know, what do people do with their time? So yeah. Like, outside of poker, is there a driving force there? That, you know, is there something in life that you can see at the periphery that you want to get to?
I wouldn't say right now I have any like very clear goals or ambitions. One thing that I'm spending a lot of time thinking about is really improving my processes, just like how I live my life and how I go about things on a day-to-day basis. And one thing that I find that I'm much happier at the end of the day when I do is like, did I get better at something? Like, it doesn't really matter what it is. Like, I play a lot of basketball and I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. But I don't just like show up and shoot around and go through the motions. Like, I'm actively thinking about how to improve as a player. Or like if I'm, I started kind of trying to teach myself how to play the piano a while back, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and you can play like 2 notes at a time, and then you can play 4 notes, and then you string it together, and you do that over and over and over and over, and all of a sudden you're playing music, and it's kind of an incredible thing. And so just like learning new things, picking up hobbies, and just like the kind of mindset of constant improvement and finding things that I enjoy doing and just getting better at is something that actually makes me really happy. And so I've been doing a lot of kind of just like living and enjoying. I
like to ask people about values a lot, but I find it's easier to ask them like a more paradoxical question on values rather than just say, what are the values that drive you in life? So I'll turn it around a little bit and ask you what pisses you off about people.
That's a really interesting question. I think over the last few years, I've been spending a lot of time like really trying to not be pissed off about stuff, to just like embrace some of those tenets of Stoicism that it's like, hey, you know, I can't control this other person. I can't control what they do, what they say, what they think, and so like I need to not let that bother me. But it's like, you know, I'm human. I'm not immune to that. I think one thing that's kind of happening, and it seems to be happening at least in modern American society, is this polarization of ideas. I feel like we're losing the middle ground. We're losing nuance, and so everything's kind of becoming black or white. Like, are you Democrat? Are you Republican? Like, we have to identify with one camp or the other. It's like, I don't want to do that. Like, I'm a human. I feel like I can change my mind. I don't have to be in one camp or the other. Like, it's, you know, I can think one thing, and then somebody can present a good argument for something else, and I can change my mind. I think it's really important to be able to do that. And I feel like in the modern discourse, we're less forgiving of people who change their mind or change their attitude or like embrace objectivity and try to learn and get better. It's like you have to be in this one camp or the other. And it's really frustrating to see that happening.
Yeah, I see that in poker sometimes as well. It's like if somebody steps out of line, particularly in the social media world, it's like, okay, this guy's the devil now, or this woman's the devil, and it's kind of like, well, actually, there's some good parts about this person, and there's some bad parts about this person, and we don't have to discard everything, because I guess with that approach, you lose the ability to learn, right?
Yeah, I think if you really identify with one idea or another, it's going to be tough to be open-minded and consider the other person's point of view. It's going to be tough to be empathetic and try to be understanding of someone else's perspective. And it's definitely, you're closing yourself off to learning and doing that, I think.
Is there a fear there as well, though? So let's take Donald Trump, for example, right? You know, he's a very polarizing figure at the moment. When I think about Donald Trump, I think to myself, wow, how did this guy get to be the most powerful man in the world? And what can we learn from the fact that he got there? But then if I air those kind of thoughts in public, which I just have, then you get attacked for being a Donald Trump supporter or whatever. So it kind of there's a block there unless you're a certain kind of personality. You think to yourself, this is not really worth the time and effort I'm going to get put in to get slandered. Where do you sit on that? Are you comfortable with voicing your opinion, or do you sometimes think to yourself, I don't think this is going to be worth the backlash?
Yeah, I think maybe I'm a little bit selective with how I pick my spots in voicing my opinion. Like, I'm not just going to go on Twitter and start, you know, devil's advocating a bunch of ideas that I don't necessarily agree with to try to engage in a discussion, because I fear that backlash. Like, it is real. But I am having conversations with friends who do have the ability to have nuance and hold a couple different ideas in their mind simultaneously without identifying with one or the other. And it's like, yeah, Donald Trump is a really interesting person, I think. Like, I think he's a maniac in a lot of ways. But he's also our president. Like, he won an election. And so, you know, 20 million people, however many people that voted for him, like, you know, they made that choice. And I think it's important to recognize that, like, hey, those people are living in our country as well, and they have this opinion. And I think it's useful to understand why they have this opinion. What does that say about where we're at in our political climate? What does that say about how people think about trade or immigration or whatever? Like, these are people that we have to live with. These are people that we have to see every day. And so to just discount them and be like, oh, these guys are idiots, like, oh, they're all racist morons. It's like, no, I don't think that's the case. But it's like, it's much easier, I think, for a lot of people to just say that and then not have to think critically about the situation. But I do think that's a problem. I think it's really important to be able to, like, understand why people are making these choices and why they think what they think.
It's really interesting what you just said. Then you made me realize that I was talking about social media, and then you turn around and said, yeah, I talk to my friends, like in real life. I talk to people about these things, and it made me think, wow, how different the world is these days. That we actually can exist just in a plane of social media conversations and not physical conversations. You know, how important are those flesh and blood relationships to you?
Yeah, and I think that's another really important thing. Like, so much gets lost in discourse when you're just like communicating via text. Like, you lose so much. Like, I was talking to my girlfriend the other day, not the other day, but it was a while ago, and she was, I was communicating with just like a dog walker. And she was like, "Hey, you're kind of coming across like an asshole." And I was like, what? It was just like a text message communication or whatever. And I was like, oh. And I didn't even really think much of it, but it's like, I wasn't, I didn't like emote with a smiley face or like put an exclamation point or something. And so it's like, it's very terse, like it's very kind of straightforward communication. And that, like, it comes across as kind of rude. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting point. And then you kind of see that on Twitter or other social media or Facebook or whatever. And it's like, you lose so much nuance. You lose the ability to kind of like, to just see the human on the other side. And so you're just communicating with this like, it's almost robotic. It's just kind of like, I can't think of a good way to express this, but like, I think that the human element is really important. And I think when much of our dialogue and communication takes place over text, over Twitter or whatever, like, it's really tough to empathize. It's tough to want to understand the other person's perspective. We lose something there. When you sit down across from someone, it's like, oh wow, this person's actually like, this is a real human. They have like their own thoughts, their own fears, their own beliefs. And it's like, it's much easier, I think, to make progress as like, in terms of ideals or like understanding the other side, if you can actually sit across from a person and actually communicate with them.
I think pace is important as well, because I'll ask you what your pace of life is like, because like, I was in Starbucks yesterday, I think it was, and Dan Smith was there on his own. What a wonderful opportunity to go and speak to like a super talented, intelligent man, And I just said hi and had some cursory conversation, then went back to do what I was doing on my laptop because I felt I needed to keep moving and I had things I need to do and keep going. I don't have time to sit down and have a conversation with someone. What's your pace like when it comes to that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I think I'm pretty similar to you in that way. Just kind of like the casual stop and chats or whatever, especially on a poker trip, like you're focused on, you have to be at this tournament in 45 minutes, you have to like, you're gonna be in this high stress, high dollar situation. It's tough to kind of like step back from that and just engage with another human just at the Starbucks or whatever. So I'll have my headphones in, I'll be listening to a podcast or I'll be like, listening to some type of like rainfall music so I can just like really concentrate and think about like what I'm going to do that day. And so I definitely turn inward a little bit and disengage from the world around me and the people that are just kind of in my immediate sphere. And I think it's probably not great. I think as an overall happiness thing, I think it's detrimental. But at the same time, like when you're trying to optimize every element of your life for high performance, I don't think you necessarily get to have those human interactions as much. Like they can be distracting, they can be disruptive. And so it's like you're constantly walking this fine line between optimizing for success in whatever area you're in, whether it's like poker or journalism or whatever you're trying to do, but then also be human and like engage with the people around you.
It's that dreaded word, balance. It always reminds me, but in the UK we have darts. So Phil the Power Taylor is like the most famous dart player we've ever had, used to beat everybody. And I remember seeing an interview and they were talking about balance and he said, I never saw my family, I never saw my kids, and that was a sacrifice I had to make in order to get where I am today. And sometimes when people talk to me about the work-family balance, and oh yeah, I need to get a better balance, I'm like, no, actually, balance doesn't work like that. I need to do everything I can in my power to apply this, and then I might have time to be able to look at my life or whatever. What do you think about balance, being as you got to such a high level in poker, for example?
I think I'm not trying to say like I'm the best in the world at anything, but I think to become among the best at something, you don't really get to have balance. Like you kind of have to go all in on it. It has to be your primary focus. Like in the early days of poker, all I did is play poker, talk about poker, think about poker. And I didn't give myself the opportunity to just kind of like live and enjoy life. So for 5 or 6 years, all I did is poker, and I think that's kind of necessary. Like, I don't know very many people that were like, oh yeah, I was kind of like doing this other stuff. I was going to school, playing a little bit on the side, and like they're super successful. Like, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Like there's so many people in this world, and there's so many people that are working really, really hard to get really, really good at something. And if you want to compete with that, you have to do the same. Like now, like the guys that are playing poker, they're so good. Like everyone's so tough. There's so many resources out there that are available to get better. And if you're not using them, you're kind of falling behind. And it's like, from a balance perspective, yeah, you probably don't get it. But like if you want to compete at the highest levels, that's the trade-off you have to make, I think.
So let's say that you've opened up your Hogwarts for talented high-stakes poker players. We just said that a laser-like focus and almost like a selfishness of your time and an intent focus on poker is one of the things that you need to get to the top. What are some of the other things, traits or things that we need to do to get there, do you think?
I think there are a couple things that are really important for being successful in poker now. Like, one is just like a really keen understanding of game theory. There are a lot of tools available to help with that, resources for learning Texas Hold'em, whatever. And I think it's important to study those and understand how like a perfect robot is going to think about solving certain poker situations. Like, it is a game of incomplete information, but you can model that incomplete information and try to make better decisions. And so I think it's useful to have some sort of foundation in that. And then start to deviate from it when you see your opponents making mistakes. Like, you see somebody who's just bluffing every single river. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to call more often, right? You see somebody who's just like super tight, never putting money in the pot. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to make sure I have a good hand when I play against him. And so like, sort of the psychological elements are really important as well. Like understanding what your opponent's thinking, why they're doing what they're doing, and kind of getting into their head. Maybe some of the just like basic mannerisms and live tell stuff, like you can read into that, but I don't think those things are as necessary. So I think like having some strong fundamental understanding of the game of poker, and then also like the psychological elements are the most important.
When I've been married twice, and so I'm getting better at it.
Okay.
If I get a third one, I'll be a fucking good husband. And I remember when the first marriage was breaking up, we went to see a marriage guidance counsellor. And I was terrified at the time because I thought my relationship was falling apart. But actually, when I left it, I thought I kind of enjoyed that, like being able to like offload and that kind of stuff. And I started to realise that for me, psychotherapy was more of a therapeutic learning tool rather than something to go to when disaster strikes. Have you ever been there? Have you ever considered psychotherapy? And if so, what are some of the things you'd like to learn about yourself through that process?
So growing up, I think I was like a little bit depressed. I was just kind of an unhappy, angsty kid. I didn't really feel like I fit in anywhere in the world necessarily. Like I had a lot of friends, I played a lot of sports, and so I always had people around that I enjoyed being around, but I kind of always felt a little bit different. And I think I was kind of sad about that. And maybe it was related to being adopted, maybe just general teenage angst or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I've done a ton of psychotherapy over the years. For the last 2.5 years or so, I started doing psychotherapy again. I go twice a week, and I found somebody that I work really well with. I met him when I was at school in New York, and we do our sessions on Skype now for like 45 minutes at a time. And it's really nice to just have an objective third party who can kind of hear about what's going on in your life, what you're struggling with, and then perhaps offer some insights, kind of probe you to get a little bit more understanding. And a lot of it is just like you talking about what's going on in your life and you finding your own way to like a better understanding of that situation. And that's like a really powerful thing. And it's not something that you can necessarily do with like your friends or your girlfriend or a parent or something like that. And it's nice. For me, it's really powerful to have like a place where I can be vulnerable and I don't have to fear like judgment from my peers or judgment from my parents or my significant other or whatever. And also someone who like kind of understands how the brain works and understands like how humans are and can guide you in directions and help you find a better way to process your emotions and your thoughts.
Are you talking about there sitting down with somebody, airing something that's bothering you, and by the time you finished airing it, you figured out where you're going wrong and what you need to put right, and the person hasn't even said anything. Their role is just to be present for you.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Sometimes that's what it is. Other times it's just like, for me, it's just like talking about my day. And it's like, well, what did I struggle with, or like what was I thinking about, or how did I have this interaction, or like it felt a little awkward. Why? Like, and just being able to kind of bounce ideas off of someone, and just, I don't know. I guess everybody's situation is going to be different, and everyone's experience with psychotherapy is going to be different. I probably have done, I don't know, hundreds of sessions, and I've been with 15 or 20 different psychotherapists, and I've only found one that I actually felt comfortable with communicating. And so I think a lot of people maybe will try it, and they'll have a couple sessions and be like, this isn't for me. But if you can find somebody who you can actually be vulnerable with, I think you can make some really good progress in understanding yourself.
Yeah, I think it's super important. I've spent the last couple of days here in Jeju chasing people, asking them for interviews, and when they say no, I'm then saying to myself, don't they like me? Am I doing something wrong? Is my approach not right, etc., etc.? And I talk to people about that, and they'll say, you're overthinking things. But I don't want to go back to a place where I wasn't thinking about these things. For me, constantly thinking and questioning what's going on, as long as it's healthy, is super important. And it sounds like you've got that trait in yourself. Where did that come from?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure. I think probably my parents. That seems like the most likely explanation. I mean, if we're in psychotherapy, that seems to be where most of our issues come from, good and bad. But just like the constant desire to improve, I think has just always been with me. I mean, even when I was a kid playing sports or whatever, like I just wanted to get better. I wanted to be better, and that sort of carried over into pretty much everything I did in life. Like whether it's playing a game, like playing chess growing up, or playing video games or whatever. Like I just wanted to compete. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to have the highest score on the board, and just kind of that innate competitiveness maybe was in there from the beginning, and then just kind of extrapolating that into just living my life. It's like, okay, well, I want to be a better person, and that's really important too. Maybe there's no objective measurement of success in being a good person, but like I can definitely be better. I can think about how to improve my interactions with other people. I can think about the things that I say. Can I say them in a different way to have a better impact? It's just it's a useful mindset, I think.
And I'm going to drag the interview right down into the gutter now by asking you, I mean, you're only in your mid-30s now, but do you spend any time thinking about death? And if so, how does that guide some of the choices that you think about in terms of what you need to do, stuff like that?
Okay, that's quite a change. I don't think about death a whole lot, to be honest. I think I used to like just be very afraid of it. I don't really believe in an afterlife, and so I think this is the life that I'm living right now is kind of all I get, and I want to do the best I can with that. And so I don't think I'm afraid of death. I don't think it's just something that's like constantly looming over me. But at the same time, I think like with the thought that there isn't something for me after death, I think it allows me to maybe appreciate the process of life a little bit more. And I don't feel like I'm looking forward to something in the end. Like this is it. This is what I'm doing right now, and I'm going to try to make the most of it, I guess.
So, with making the most of this one life that we've got, what are some of the ambitions that you would like to fulfill before the lights go out?
And this is a really big question, and I think this is something that my answer is going to change every year, maybe even moment to moment. I don't really think I have any like overarching ambitions like win the World Series main event. It's like I can't really control that. And so I spend a lot of time just focusing on just the day-to-day moments and just like my interactions with friends and loved ones, and just like constantly improving those interactions and trying to build a group around me and a community that I genuinely enjoy being around, that like I feel happy with and feels happy with me, that I can trust and I can rely on. And so yeah, I guess my biggest ambition is to be at a point in life where I'm just surrounded by people that I love and care about and who love and care about me. To like build a strong, healthy, happy family. I think about education a lot. Like my educational experience growing up, I didn't think was particularly good. I went to a good school. I was surrounded by really smart people, but I didn't feel like I was learning that much. I wasn't intellectually curious. And I think that kind of got beaten out of me by the system a little bit when they're like, hey, learn this for, memorize this. And it's like, I don't really want to. Like, why? I don't see why. And so I didn't feel like I had a ton of flexibility to kind of pursue things I'm interested in. And so maybe like something that, it's not necessarily an ambition, but something that I'd like to do when I have a little bit more free time, maybe a little bit more money, is like start a school or something and try to like get more involved in the educational process. And like when I have kids, I think that's something that's going to be really important to me, like cultivating their educational experience so it's a little bit different than mine. And I want to be able to inspire them to kind of learn and be creative and pursue things they're interested in, rather than just like, hey, you have to do this, you have to jump through these hoops, you can get a job and you can, work for somebody, and then you're 60 and then you're retired and then you die. Like that's not the path that worked for me. And I think it's kind of the path that, at least in America, the modern educational system kind of like points you towards. And I don't know, I like to spend more time thinking about that kind of thing. I think it's quite interesting.
The UK is just the same. And what will bring it to a head is probably when you have a child and you start thinking about, okay, I need to make a decision about where my child's going to get her education from, and then they'll be like, oh, fuck, we need to do something about this because I don't like options A, B, C, D, and E.
Right.
I think you'll be a good dad.
Thank you.
Just finishing off, how does poker make you feel?
Poker makes me feel really good. It's given me so much freedom. Like if I can't even imagine what I'd do if I hadn't found poker when I was 18, right? Like I probably would have just gone to college, taken like finance and accounting or something, and just been this like miserable middle-aged fat accountant just like going through life. Like I don't know. But it's like because of poker, I'm able to sort of pursue my interests whenever I want. I'm able to live life on my own terms. And that's like a really powerful thing, and I'm super happy about it.
And just for the record, when he said about the middle-aged fat accountant, Chris Moneymaker, he wasn't talking about you. I just want to clear that up and clarify. Thank you.
Sorry, Chris.
David, thanks very much for being our guest on I Am High Stakes Poker. Really appreciate our time.
My name is David Benefield. I'm High Stakes Poker.